Hi everyone, my name is Zach, and in this video we want to take a look at 17 tips for faster modeling in Blender. This not only includes edit mode tools, this also includes object mode tools, so everything that can help you to speed up your modeling process in Blender. Also, we only concentrate on features that are built into Blender by default, so we don't use any add-ons like bool tools, loop tools and so on, which are certainly pretty useful, but yeah, I just want to concentrate on the stuff we have by default. Also, don't be confused, I'm using the Pie menu add-on, which you can enable in the user preferences under add-ons. This opens up this circular shaped menu when you press Tab for switching to object or edit mode, or when you press C for changing the viewport shading. If you want to know more about this add-on, watch my other video with 14 tips on working faster with the user interface of Blender. The link is down below in the video description. And before we start, I want to thank you for all the subscribers. In the past 30 days, this channel gained over 2,000 new subscribers, which is pretty amazing. So thank you, and yeah, this video is for you. Have fun.
Tip number 1, dissolve selection. When we switch to edit mode from our little alien dude here, we can see he had a lot of edge loops here, for example. And sometimes it's pretty useful to remove a complete edge loop. And in this case, we can press X and choose, in this case, dissolve edges. You can see we also can dissolve vertices or faces if we like. So if I click on dissolve edges, the edges will be removed, but the rest stays where it is. There's even a shortcut for this. If I press Ctrl X, you can see the selected vertices will be dissolved. But in this case, if you only want to dissolve the edges, you have to switch to edge selection. That means depending on what selection mode you have enabled, it will dissolve the vertices, the edges or the faces. If I now press Ctrl X, the edges will be removed. Tip number 2, edge or vertex slide. If we take a look at our alien dude again, sometimes we need to move edges or vertices around. And in this case, I want to move this whole loop here. So if I simply press G and move this over here, this could work, but you can see the shape of this object will change. And also it could be that you totally destroy your model. And in this case, we can enable the slide mode by simply pressing G twice. So I press G, G, and now I can slide this loop here. This also works for only one edge, for example. And the same for vertices, for one or for multiple vertices as well, as you can see. Tip number 3, merge vertices. So if you want to merge one or more vertices, usually you simply select them, press Alt M, and then choose the position where they should be merged, like at center. Now we have only one vertex. But by always pressing Alt M and choosing this takes a lot of time. And sometimes you want to merge a lot of vertices in different directions. And here's a tip how you can do this. First of all, enable snapping. Snap element set to vertex. And now over here at mesh, choose AutoMerge editing. In this way, vertices at the same position will automatically merge. And with this snapping option down here, two vertices will snap together if they are close enough. So if I press G, move it over here, it will snap to this vertex, and if I now left click, it will automatically merge. And this not only works with this snapping feature, it also works, for example, if I slide this. So press double G, slide this over here, press left click, and then these vertices will automatically merge. So pretty useful also if you want to remove a whole loop cut. Tip number 4, bevel in edit mode. A lot of you probably know the bevel modifier, which adds the beveled edge to our object, and we can also add these segments to make this edge round. But what you probably don't know is that you also can use this in edit mode. If I add this simple plane here and extrude one edge, I simply can bevel this one edge here or multiple edges by using Ctrl B. And if I now scroll the mouse wheel, I can add these segments too. So, and after I've confirmed this, down here in the operator panel, I can, for example, change the segments, the amount, or the profile if I like. Yeah, and this quick I can create a studio background. Tip number 5, Boolean in edit mode. Same as for the Bevel modifier, a lot of you probably know the Boolean modifier. But the Boolean operation you also can use directly in edit mode. If I switch to edit mode, I duplicate the shape of this object and select it. You can select a whole shape in edit mode by pressing L above this shape. And now if I want to cut this out from this model, simply select this and then press space and search for Boolean. And then you have this intersect Boolean. Click on that and you can see it will be cut out from the other object. You also can switch it down here in the operator panel by checking this swap checkbox. Or you can also change the Boolean mode from difference to intersect to union if you want to unify these objects. You can see here. Pretty nice if you don't want to use a Boolean modifier or the Bool tool add-on, for example. Tip number 6, extrude to cursor. Here's another quick one. If I add, for example, plane, probably all of you know that you can extrude using E. But there's a more handy way to extrude, at least in some cases, by simply selecting one edge, one vertice or one face, and then hold down Ctrl and left click somewhere, and it will be automatically extruded to this position, and the face where the extrusion comes from will also be rotated a bit. And this is pretty nice if you quickly want to kind of draw shapes. This works pretty fast. Tip number 7, grid fill. Sometimes you want to close a hole in your model, and usually you would select the border of it and press F to fill it, and then maybe connecting the vertices using J. But certainly this takes a lot of time, and we can do it even faster. The one thing we have to consider is that the hole must have an even amount of vertices. Up here we can see it, we have 10 vertices, so here this would work. And now we press Ctrl F and choose grid fill. We do this, and right now it fills up the holes with only quads. This is pretty nice, especially if you want to model a character or if you do retopology or anything like this. And down here in the operator panel, we can basically rotate the new faces and add even more cuts basically until you have what you want. And this, for example, works also if you have like an open cylinder with an even amount of vertices. Ctrl F, grid fill. Tip number 8, bridge edge loops. Sometimes you want to connect two loops, like in this case. I select these two loops and I want to connect them. The one important thing is that both loops have the same amount of vertices. Now I press Ctrl E for the edges menu and choose the option bridge edge loops. And as you can see now, these two loops are connected. And if there is something wrong, you can change some settings down here in the operator panel. For example, you can twist this if this is somehow wrong, or you just want to twist this. And you also can add cuts. So you pretty quickly can add missing parts here. Also very useful for retopology. Tip number 9, mirroring in edit mode. Here we have our little alien dude, and certainly I've modeled this before using a mirror modifier. But then at some point I applied it to add variation to the shapes, like here. The eye on the one side looks different than the eye on the other side. But most part, like the legs, the arms, the hands and so on, are symmetrical. So what if I want to change something on the hands and I want this to be changed on the other side as well? So I switch to edit mode. And up here in the tool shelf, we have this options tab, and here I can enable X mirror. And now if I, for example, scale the hand, you can see it will be automatically changed on the other side as well. But this only works for transforming the vertices, faces and edges. What we can't do is extrude loop cut and all that stuff. Basically everything that adds or removes geometry. That means if I, for example, dissolve this loop cut using Ctrl X, it won't be dissolved on the other side. In this case, we have to use a mirror modifier again. Tip number 10, pivot point 3D cursor. If we want to scale or rotate multiple objects in object mode, then this always happens on the position of our manipulator or the pivot point. Blender's default settings set the pivot point to the median point, and this is basically the average coordinate from the center points of all selected objects, or in edit mode from all the selected vertices. And as you can see here, right now here I have a lot of vertices and here only a few. And if I now rotate this, certainly this will happen in relation to this point here, or same thing for the scaling. And also in object mode, this happens the same way. If I select all them, I can rotate them and scale them according to this median point. In this cases, all the center points of the cubes are at the center. But what if the center points are all different, as you can see here? Then you don't have the center of all the selected objects, and in many cases you don't want to rotate or scale your objects according to basically a randomly placed pivot point. And in this case we can choose our 3D cursor position as pivot point. And to do so we switch down here under pivot point to 3D cursor, and as you can see now our manipulator, these arrows here, always are at the same position as our 3D cursor. And certainly if I, for example, place it here and press R for rotating, you can see we will rotate our selected elements around the 3D cursor, and even if we want to scale it. And if you want to have a little bit more control about that, you can select an object, for example, select an edge, a vertex or a face, press Shift S and snap cursor to selected. And now you can see the cursor is exactly in the center of these two selected vertices. And now, you can, for example, rotate this directly around this axis here. And if we go back to our alien character here, if we want to, for example, twist the arm, we simply go to edit mode, select the lower arm here. And if we want to have a smooth transition here, we also can enable proportional editing. And now I just place the 3D cursor here and I don't change my view, and now I can rotate this. I scroll my mouse wheel to make the proportional editing size a little bit smaller. And now, as you can see, we can really simple twist the arm and give this character a new position without adding bones. Let's do the same thing for the leg. And this works perfectly fine, as you can see. And don't forget to switch back to median point if you don't want to have the 3D cursor enabled anymore. Tip number 11. Pivot point individual origins. Sometimes we want to scale objects individually, like in this case I have a few houses, but I want to make them bigger. So I select all of them and just hit S for scaling, but certainly we now not only scale the houses, we also are changing the position. And there's a simple trick to change this, and for that down here under pivot point I switch to individual origins. And now, if I hit scale, you can see we can scale our objects individually. The same thing works for edit mode. Right now, I have selected all these faces here and hit E for extruding. And usually, if I want to scale all these faces and hit S, it acts like this. But if we want to scale all the faces individually, we can switch the pivot point to individual origins and hit scale, and as you can see, this works perfectly fine. And in edit mode it behaves like this. If a selection is connected like this, then this whole selection will act as one individual element, as you can see. But if there's a space in between, like here, you can see this face here will be scaled individually as well. Tip number 12, manipulate center points. Sometimes we just want to increase the distance between different objects. And for example, if I just scale it or move them around, they always move together. But there's a little button right here, this one, and if I enable this, we basically can scale our objects, but then we will only change the position and not the scale. And as you can see right here, we can change the distance of objects. And this certainly also works if we just have two objects, for example, and just want to increase the distance by just hitting scale. But this only works in object, pose and weight paint mode. Tip number 13, randomize transform. Here we have a lot of houses and they are all looking the same. They have the same rotation, the same scale, but not the same position. And now I want to randomize all these houses. But certainly going through all of them and rotating, scaling them would take basically forever. So there's a simple trick to do this. I select everything, go to Object, Transform and Randomize Transform, or we hit space and search for Randomize Transform. Now I press T, and down here in the operator panel we have all the options we need. Now we can randomize location, rotation and scale. So as you can see, if I change the values for the location, you can see how everything is changing. Then also the rotation, in this case I only want to change them in the Z direction. And then we also can scale them, certainly in different axes, or if you want to scale them evenly, select scale even, and now if you change one value, you can see how they are changing. And this way you can transform multiple objects randomly pretty quick. Tip number 14, snap to faces. Here you can see my vehicle I've created for my artwork, the journey. If you want to know a little bit more how I created the whole thing, just watch the behind the scenes video I've created. The link is in the video description. And here I want to show you a very cool feature. If I switch to this layer here, I've created this very simple bolt. And important, I've moved the center point of this bolt down to the bottom. This you can do by simply switching to edit mode, selecting everything, and then if you move the object you can see the center point stays where it is, and in this way you very easily can change the position of the center point. And if you now switch back to object mode, you can see that rotating, scaling and so on will be done according to the position of this center point here. And now we want to add a lot of these bolts to the surface of the vehicle. And certainly if we want to do it by hand, by just positioning this stuff, this would take basically forever. And there is certainly a nice trick to speed up the workflow. And for doing this, we enable snap during transform, and as snap element, we choose face. Right now, if I do it, you can see it somehow snaps to the surface, but not really in the way I would expected this. So I also enable this button here. This aligns the rotation with the snapping target, as you can see, but in some areas this still don't have the result I want. And because of that, I also enable this button right here, project individual elements on the surface of other objects. And if I now transform it, you can see it perfectly aligns to the surface of the object, which is basically behind this object. So it takes our view and then projects the object from our view on the surface of the object that is behind it, basically. This only works in object mode, because if I would now switch to edit mode and move it around, it will be also projected on the surface, but not as a whole object, but instead all the individual vertices will be projected on the surface. This is pretty nice for retopology. If you want to learn more about that and how to use this properly, watch my retopology tutorial, link in the video description. And if you're wondering why all these objects are now selected, although they are still separate objects, then wait for the next tip. Tip number 15, duplicate linked. If we are duplicating something, we're doing it with Shift D, and then the object will be duplicated. This is how we would expect it. But imagine you have all these bolts all over the car and now want to change all the bolts at the same time, like the size, or want to add some elements or whatever. And certainly if you just duplicate it, you have to do it for all the objects one after another, and this could take forever, or you just delete everything and then start from scratch. But this is not what we want. There's a much better way to doing things like this, and that's by duplicating these objects as linked object. That means if I press Alt-D, and that means these two and also the other bolts I have duplicated here are linked at each other. That means all of them are using the exact same mesh data. That means in our library we have only one bolt mesh and all these objects are using the same one. This has several benefits. Right now we can edit one, and as you can see, all the others will change as well. We also can scale it. So this is perfect for editing multiple objects at the same time. But in object mode we still can scale, rotate and move them individually. And if you forgot to press Alt-D, like in this case, I have duplicated them with Shift-D. You can see in edit mode they are not linked. Then simply select them all, and in this case I want to add them to these objects here. Then I select one of them, and then we press Ctrl L for make links, and then we choose object data. And now as you can see, if I switch to edit mode, all these objects are linked. And what happens if we don't want to link some of these objects? Like I want to add this bolt here individually, then I select this or several and press U and make single user, and here we choose object and data. And now this object is a single user again. That means they are not linked at each other. Tip number 16, clipping border. This little alien dude here has a mouse, teeth and a tongue. And imagine we want to edit this stuff inside the mouse. Certainly we can switch to wireframe mode, but not in every case this really helps, as you can see. So, and in this case I would use the clipping border. By pressing Alt-B we can draw a box, and basically the thing inside the box will stay and the rest will be hidden. And now we have this nice cross section of this alien, and I can select the body, switch to edit mode, and yeah, change stuff inside. And as you can see, this can be quite handy. And with Alt-B you can disable the clipping border again. And the final tip, number 17, add subsurf modifier shortcut. I guess this is something a lot of you already know, but I wanted to show it anyway. If you want to add a subsurf modifier to your objects to subdivide it and add this nice rounded shape, then we have to select the object, go to add modifier, subdivision surface, and change the resolution. But we can also do it quicker by pressing Ctrl and then a number, not on the number pad, the numbers above the letters. Press 1 for 1 subdivisions, Ctrl 2 for 2 subdivisions, Ctrl 3 for 3, and so on. And since the subsurf modifier is one of the modifiers we add the most in most cases, this really helps to quickly add this subsurf modifier to the selected objects. And the cool thing is, this also works for multiple selected objects, as you can see.
Alright guys, that's it with this video. I hope you liked it and learned a few things. If so, tell your friends about it and share this video. And if you have other cool modeling tricks, share them with us in the comments below so other people can also benefit from this. Yeah, and if you like this video, you can support this YouTube channel so I can produce more videos like this in the future. Check out my Gumroad store. There you find a bunch of bonus tutorials you can purchase. Yeah guys, that's it with this video, and we see us in the next one. Goodbye! Alright, you're still here as always, and I'm also still here. I think this means something. This time I want to show you something I've purchased a few days ago. This is this thing here. It's an ergonomic mouse basically. When you're working with a standard mouse, your arm is always twisted, and this can lead to some very dangerous injury, dangerous for you as an artist or as someone which is always working on the computer. Because if your arm is injured, then that means that you maybe could not work as an artist anymore the way you did before. So it's good to take some preventive actions. And yeah, I had some strange feeling down here in my lower arm, and that's the reason why I Googled for a more healthy mouse. And yeah, I don't want to mention a specific product here because you find a lot of these mouses online on Amazon or something. They are not cheap. This one was 30 euros, I guess. But if I can prevent any injury in my arms, this was definitely worth the money. So basically, take care of your health. Don't just take care of your health when it is too late. And yeah, maybe this can help. I just tested this a few weeks now, and certainly you need some time to get used to it. But if you do, then this works quite convenient. And yeah, I really like it. And right now I don't want to miss it anymore. So just a little tip. This is not a sponsored product or anything. And yeah, this is just what I wanted to show you. Thanks for watching, guys. And a lot of new cool stuff is coming in the future. So stay tuned.